what's up guys? My name is Zach and today I am driving a 2005 Buick LaCrosse CXL. Up front is a 3.8 liter V6 and down below is a 4-speed automatic transmission. Now I am super excited to be driving this here Buick LaCrosse for a couple of reasons. First of all, I haven't reviewed one here on the channel. But second of all, the more important reason to me is that I grew up riding in the back of these cars. My grandparents owned two of these back to back. However, they sold them before I actually got my license and before I was reviewing cars. So I never had the opportunity until today. But before we get on to anything else, I have a website, zackpradel.com, where you can submit your own vehicle to be reviewed by me through a quick and easy submission form. You could also buy stickers like this retro sticker pack or a big friggin' bottle sticker, both with free shipping, and you could read my behind the scenes blog to see what I'm filming before it comes out on the channel. But let's get back to that 3.8 liter V6 under the hood. Well, it is a 3800 Series 3 engine, meaning it's the third iteration of the 3800 series, which started all the way back in 1991. Now, I've driven a couple vehicles with this engine, most notably the Buick Park Avenue, which was supercharged. And I've always been fond of these engines. They're not the most modern. This one makes about 200 horsepower, and it's just one of those lumpy, lazy, but reliable engines. And I like that a lot. However, that's not the only engine that was offered here in the Buick LaCrosse. At the same time, if you went up to the CXS trim level, the top trim level for 2005, you actually got a 3.6 liter V6. So smaller displacement, but it actually had a higher output at 240 horsepower, which is really nice. However, it doesn't stop there. For the final two model years of this first generation LaCrosse, they had the Buick LaCrosse Super, which came with the 5.3 liter V8 out of the Pontiac Grand Prix I recently reviewed. If anyone has a Buick LaCrosse Super, please email me or submit to my website. I would love to review one because a front-wheel drive V8 LaCrosse is just so cool to me. But like I said, paired to a 4-speed automatic transmission, nothing really going on there, nothing too notable or spectacular. Last but not least, as I mentioned earlier, the Buick LaCrosse is front-wheel drive. With that out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have a handful of gauges. On the left is a tachometer, in the center is my speedometer, and on the right is my fuel and coolant temperature. And don't worry, that check engine light is just for an O2 sensor. Nothing's mechanically wrong with the engine. On the steering wheel, I have my cruise control options to the left and right, and then I have a nice Buick badge right in the center. The steering wheel does look a little bit dated, but we'll talk about that with the car overall. The car itself is very old-fashioned Buick. We'll talk about why in a second. Off to the left, I have my light settings for headlights as well as interior lights, and a climate control vent. And on the door, I have my lock and unlock, but this also doubles as the trunk release button. So if you hold down unlock, this will actually open the trunk, much like the Pontiac Grand Prix of the same era. Moving down on the door, I have my power mirrors and power window options and a nice little wood accent on the door. Moving into the center, I have two more climate control vents and a bunch of information buttons. Now, this will actually change the little readout in the gauge cluster that we talked about earlier. So I'll show all of the different things that you can get the Buick to tell you. GM, in all of their products, whether it be Chevy, Buick, Cadillac, Pontiac, whatever it might be, they were always fantastic at giving you tons and tons and tons of information that you might want while driving. Most cars do this now, but GM has been doing this since the late 90s. But getting back to the center stack, we then have our radio. Nothing really to write home about. This was a little bit before the aux cord era, so you're pretty much stuck with CDs, AM and FM, which that's okay. I do have climate controls down below that. Interestingly enough, I do get dual zone climate controls. Very, very nice, as well as auto climate controls and fan speed. Of course, here you'll see some typical GM wear and tear on these buttons. Starting to chip a little bit, but this is so common on this era of vehicles that it's not really a concern. Then we move into the seats and center console. Now, the center console, I do have this little cubby that's openable up at the front for storage. Then we do have cup holders, so we will do a big friggin' bottle test here in the Buick LaCrosse, and it has this nice little swivel out arm that accommodates the big friggin' bottle. Look at that, the LaCrosse passes the big friggin' bottle test. However, as we talk about the seats, we'll also be mentioning that center console again. The seats are nice and comfortable as you would expect out of a Buick, nothing interesting there. However, there is a party trick for the center seat. Yes, I said center seat. You can actually flip the center console up and then fold out an upper portion, making the front seat an actual bench seat and having a third seat belt in the center. This is just so cool. Not every Buick LaCrosse got this, but I think it's such a cool and unique feature, and definitely something that is an older style for Buick, which we'll talk about towards the end of the video. But speaking of seats, we do have back seats, so let's go do a back seat review. All right, so we're in the back of the 2005 Buick LaCrosse CXL. Something I did forget to mention up front is that there were 3 trim levels offered in 2005. The CX, CXL, and CXS. Like I mentioned earlier, the CXS got that higher horsepower engine. The CXL was the mid-range and the CX was the base. But anyway, back here, very, very comfortable. I remember these seats so well. They're so cushiony, so comfortable. Sitting like an adult, I've actually somewhat outgrown this back seat a little bit. My hair is starting to touch the ceiling a little bit, but if I slouch down, I'm 5'11". It's not that big of an issue. I do get a center console with 2 cup holders. And that's pretty much it. I don't get really any other crazy features back here, but it is still a Buick sedan back seat, which is synonymous with very, very good. Let's go take a quick look at the trunk, and then we'll talk about the looks. All right, so we're on the back of the Buick LaCrosse. I already popped it from inside from that door button. And as you can see, like a normal Buick, it has tons and tons of space back here, which is just fantastic. I don't really get any crazy features back here. However, it is a big American sedan trunk, and that is all I can ask for from a Buick LaCrosse. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and I have recently coined the term for these cars, macaroni styling. And the reason I call it that is because they're blobby, they're kind of undefined, they're not very angular. However, to me, macaroni and cheese was always a comfort food. I grew up on Kraft mac and cheese and Tyson chicken nuggets, and so it has that warm, comforting feel to me. As I mentioned at the top of the video, and I'll talk about more at the end of the video, I grew up around these cars, and so to me, there's so much nostalgia that just oozes out of this car, much like whenever I eat a bowl of Kraft mac and cheese, I'm immediately 8 years old again. One last thing I do want to talk about with the styling is something I absolutely love about the Buick LaCrosse, and that is the rear taillight styling. I don't think anyone has ever mentioned this in any review of this car, but it is so satisfying that the trunk accent lines, the trunk body lines, actually line up perfectly with the reverse lights inside the taillight housing. It is so satisfying to me whenever I see that. Anytime I'm behind a Buick LaCrosse, I just, it's so good. But now let's get on to my final thoughts here on the Buick LaCrosse from 2005. Well, 2005 was actually the first model year for the Buick LaCrosse here in the States. And that year they sold almost 100,000 of them, 92,000 Buick LaCrosse in 2005. And every year subsequently after, it went down and down and down to 71,000 in 06, 47,000 in 07, 36,000 in 08, and 27,000 in 09. But these sold relatively well, and you still see a handful of them on the streets. That's because they're reliable, they're comfortable, and as we'll talk about, this is kind of the end of old style Buick. No, it doesn't have a V8. That would make it truly old-fashioned Buick. But it has that fold-out center bench seat. And it does have a V6 that at its core was almost 20 years old by the time it was put into this car. And as a matter of fact, 2009 was the last model year for this body style of LaCrosse, and it was the final car to still have the 3800 Series 3 engine. When the Buick LaCrosse entered its second generation, the 3800 series died for good. And so you can feel that this car is kind of clutching on to that old style of Buick, where now today most Buicks are 2-liter 4-cylinders. Buick doesn't actually even make a sedan now. They only make crossovers and SUVs. So while this isn't really an old-fashioned Buick, it still has a couple of those attributes. I do want to touch quickly on the name, however. This here in the States is the Buick LaCrosse. I've been calling it the Buick LaCrosse the whole video. However, up in Canada, these are actually called the Buick Allures. The reason for that is in French-Canadian dialects, LaCrosse is shockingly similar to a word that means to commit fraud or self-pleasure. I'm not kidding. The Buick Self-Pleasure. That wouldn't have sold too well, so they switched it to the Allure up in Canada. But the reason I was so excited to talk about this car and to drive this car is because I grew up in the back of one of these. My grandparents had 2 of these. It was always comfortable. They loved this car. My grandpa is a GM man through and through. He's owned Buicks and Cadillacs almost his entire adult life. And so they got one of these when I was in about 3rd grade and sold it when I was a sophomore in high school. So most of my adolescence was spent in one of these. And I remember so vividly riding in the back seat on a Saturday morning. My grandma loves garage sales. And so we would go to garage sales for her. My grandpa would stay in the car and listen to the Cubs game on the radio.
There was not just a little smoke there. There was a huge offer thrown Carlos Correa's way in Chicago, but because of some representation issues with Correa and his camp.
So whenever I see one of these, it always brings up good memories. That's what makes a car so special to people. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you have some type of connection to a Buick LaCrosse, or you're looking to make new connections, and I highly suggest that you do. Huge thank you to Kai for letting me take out his 2005 Buick LaCrosse CXL. Thank you so much, Kai, for letting me relive a little bit of my childhood and finally review one of the cars that has escaped me for the last 5 or 6 years. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.